Okay, so as I said, we're continuing our study of Christ, and we're headed into the last few days. So where we are this morning in Matthew 24 and 25, if you can see, according to this timeline, this is, like we said last week, the more traditional timeline that has the crucifixion on Friday, that we are in the what's called the Olivet Discourse, which is Matthew 24 and 25, which would have been a couple of days before the crucifixion. We'll talk about, we get a little closer, which timeline you prefer as far as was it Friday or Wednesday. But what I'm concerned about here is just kind of keeping things, getting us in the right order, in the order of how things happen. So we're going to start this morning in Matthew chapter 24. We'll read the first couple of verses. Then Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said to them, "Do you not see all these things? Assuredly, I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down." So, what do you think the disciples' reaction to this statement was? Shocked. You think about, I mean, and in general, we're heading toward Christ's crucifixion. And he's already been warning them and preparing them for his death, right? We've seen passages on that already. And now he kind of throws this at them. That you see, that they're kind of like, ooh, look at the temple. Look how great it is. And his response is, all that's going to be destroyed. And you think about what the emotions and all the things that the disciples have to be going through right now, with some of the stuff that he's telling them about him that they don't understand, and now he tells them this, which they don't understand. And you think about, because to them, what's the implications of what Jesus is talking about here? Norma?
Yeah, it's the destruction of their people.
Yeah.
Because that's the center of everything for them.
Yeah, so he's told them that he's going to die. And now he's telling them, see, all this is going to be destroyed. So at this point, they've got to be like, wait, we need some help understanding this, and that's kind of what we see happen. So moving into the next few verses here in 3 to 14. Now, as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" And Jesus had answered and said to them, "Take heed that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you're not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another. Then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. But he who endures to the end shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. So now, after the introduction, so what question do the apostles raise here? Yeah, when? Again, you can imagine what they're thinking. Oh, yeah, he's told them this. They're kind of like, well, when is this going to happen? How do we know when this is going to happen? Is the question that they ask. What's going to signal your return and the end of the world? And actually, they're kind of blending a bunch of stuff together here in the question they're asking. Norm P, is that what?
The assumption for them was that if the temple was destroyed, that's the end of the world. They, as far as they were concerned, as Jews, they were going to be here for as long as the earth turned. That temple would be in Jerusalem for as long as the earth turned. And nothing would change until the earth ended. And so they made the assumption that if the temple is going to be destroyed, that's the end of the world. That means he's coming. That means it all should be together. And that was not at all how it had been planned out.
Yeah, and remember, these guys still in the back of their mind still have a little trouble with the spiritual thing, you know. They're still kind of thinking about this in a material way, as far as the coming of Christ on earth, basically. And so you can see that if they're going to be part of this, hey, let me in on when this is going to happen and how it's going to happen, so we can be aware.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Remember, what kind of kingdom were they expecting? Still at this point, physical, earthly kingdom. Another David, right? David back on his throne. We're going to boot these Romans out of here, and we're going to put it back to like it was when Solomon. That's what they wanted, right? That's what their expectation of Messiah was. And man, he starts describing this stuff. There's going to be wars, rumors of wars. You're going to get persecuted. All these tribulations are coming. These things that he's telling them. But essentially, he's giving them a message here, though, about don't be deceived. Right, there are lots of things that are going to happen. And don't be deceived. And we'll get into that a little as we continue here about false Christ and all these things that are going to happen. But to be prepared. That this is not going to be an easy thing, right? Physically, this is not going to be an easy thing that's going to happen that he's talking about. And he wants his disciples to be prepared for what's about to happen. And then the next question I asked there, number 3, was what good thing would result? And I want to also flip over and read a little bit from the Mark passage. So Mark 13, 9 through 11. In Mark 13, 9 through 11, it says, "But watch out for yourselves, for they will deliver you up to councils. You will be beaten in the synagogues. You will be brought before rulers and kings for my name's sake, for a testimony to them. And the gospel must first be preached to all nations. But when they arrest you and deliver you up, do not worry beforehand or premeditate what you will speak. But whatever is given you in that hour, speak that, for it is not you who speak, but the Holy Spirit. Now brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child, and children will rise up against parents and cause them to be put to death. And you will be hated by all for my name's sake, but he who endures to the end shall be saved." So what's the good thing that Jesus is talking about here? Shirley? Salvation. He says, what's gonna spread no matter what? The gospel. The gospel is going to spread. Yeah, it's going to be preached to all. Is essentially what he's saying here. So the good news of the kingdom is going to be preached throughout the whole world. Well, what's Jesus setting up here? Norm?
Setting up the Great Commission for them, the mission that's going to follow the mission. When he's gone, and kind of like a lot of bad stuff's going to happen. You're going to have struggles and trials, but stay on mission. And the mission is this: and it's going to be taking the gospel to the world.
Yeah, because remember, they didn't have a clue again as what he was doing, did they? But he was setting up his kingdom. And what is his kingdom? The church, right? The spiritual kingdom. The church. Is the church going to remain after all this stuff happens? Yeah, that's really that's where we're headed, right? We're headed into the church, into the New Testament church, and it's set up and spread. And then we know that these physical things are going to happen in the early days of the church, but the church is going to endure, and the gospel is going to be preached. And again, what about them? What help is he promising them in the situations that they're going to be in? Norray?
He's going to give them the words to say at the time.
Yeah, that don't be concerned about what you're supposed to say. That I'm going to help you out, right? The Spirit is going to prompt you as to what to speak. And then there in Mark, how and he does so in Matthew as well in verse 13. What assurance does he give them? But he who what? He who endures, right? He who endures to the end shall be saved. My Bible has a little definition of that word, the Greek word there. It says to hold one's ground in conflict, bear up against adversity, hold out under stress, stand firm, persevere under pressure, wait calmly and courageously. It is not passive resignation to the fate and mere patience, but the active, energetic resistance to defeat that allows calm and brave endurance. I thought that was a really good definition. I know Norm and Brad, our military folks, in that kind of the attitude of a great general, that instills that confidence into their troops. Hey, stick this out, we're going to win. We're going to win in the end. And that's what Jesus is telling them here, that, there's some stuff that's going to happen, but endure. Stand firm to the end, and you will receive eternal life. Ultimately, is what he's promising them. All right, does anybody have any further comments on Ray? Go ahead.
And where is that end at? It's still going on.
Do what?
The end that
Yeah,
he's talking
it's
about.
still going on.
It's
We're still waiting
still
for
coming.
the end, right? We'll get to that here in a few minutes.
And we see a lot of these things here too, taking place in the denominational world, the way they're talking.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of things that Jesus says here that were pointed in his time that tries to get extended into our time, isn't it? And it can get real confusing when people do that. Norm Pete, you have another comment?
Yeah, it was interesting, the plethora of things that they asked in like 2 sentences. There's just an enormous amount of what is all this, and how he details specifics for each section in turn. It's not like he tried to answer all of them at once. He's just like this, almost like a list. And if you follow the list around, you don't get confused like the denominations do as to what he's talking about. It's just this, and you got all this is going to happen, and you got to keep going. And the results isn't up to us as far as what would go on. It wasn't up to them. And like when you get into this situation, the Holy Spirit, it happened multiple times. Peter said something, and the crowds repented. Stephen said something, and the crowds murdered him. So it wasn't on them what they were going to get when the Spirit gave them utterance. It wasn't on them. It was on the people that received it. And what was on them was, what do? Do you endure till the end, or do you give up? And that's the same way we are today. It is not on us when we speak to somebody else about God and the gospel and salvation, what happens. It is up to us to deliver it truthfully and honestly and accurately, just as the Spirit has given to us. What happens is, what they do with it, it's up to us to endure what they do with it. That's it.
Good point. You may ask.
Yeah, just the beauty of the gospel is the idea that you can look at what was being taught to them then. The things of the world don't change. You're going to have persecutions. You're going to have things that are going to be happening in the world. It's going to be all this is happening, and that's applicable to them. And those kinds of things, those stressors, are going to be applicable to us today. But it's important that we stay on the message, no matter what, and endure till the end.
Okay, let's continue. We'll continue reading verse 15. Gil, could I get you to turn over to Daniel and be ready to read a couple of passages there when I get done reading this? We'll start in Daniel 9, if you can head to Daniel 9. So in Matthew chapter 24, we'll start in verse 15 again. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not go down to take anything out of the house. And let him who is in the field not go back to get his clothes. But woe to those who are pregnant and those who are nursing babies in those days, and pray that your flight might not be in winter or in the Sabbath. For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been seen since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there, do not believe it. For false Christ and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. Therefore, if they say to you, look, he is in the desert, do not go out, or look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man be. For wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. Okay, so what he refers to a prophecy here. What is that prophecy? Gave you a clue by asking Gil to turn over. Right? It's from Daniel, and he says it here. It's this abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel. So Gil, could you read Daniel chapter 9, verse 27?
Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation, which is determined, is poured out on the desolate.
Okay, and then chapter 12, verse 11.
The time that the daily sacrifice is taken away, and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days.
Okay, so what's the clue here? So Jesus ties what's about to happen to this abomination of desolation. What was going to happen when the abomination of desolation occurred? What was ending? Yeah, he called it the daily sacrifices, I think was what your version said, right? It said that the daily sacrifices were coming to. When you see that happening, then you know that this prophecy of Daniel was being fulfilled. And then too bad we don't have Todd here. Todd's our Daniel. He's taught it and he's our expert on all the prophecies here. But again, when was all this supposed to happen? If you remember all of Daniel's prophecies. In what kingdom? Rome, right? We concluded in our Daniel study that these fulfillments were happening during that time. So these are our clues here to show us. So what is Jesus discussing in this section? The destruction of Jerusalem, right? Because we see that the temple, the end of the sacrifices is going to occur. So in this case, he is telling them there are signs, right? There are signs that this is going to happen, and what does he tell them to do? Yeah, essentially, get out of there, right? When you see this coming, then the best thing for you to do is to get out of there, for sure. And what does he assure them as well about the Messiah's return relative to this time? Yeah, this is not the second coming of the Messiah. I guess they wouldn't recognize that, obviously, because he hadn't gone yet. But we can see that this section is not talking about the end of the end, so to speak. That this end here is pointed at the Jews, isn't it? Yeah, we can see that from our clues from Daniel, and then we'll get to it in just a second because he really sets the time frame a little later in the passage here. Now that's it. I thought verse 28 was interesting. It says, "For wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together." What's he talking about there? Norma, you.
One thing that that I go to right away is the Roman legions all had standards of eagles, but it basically where the rotting dead is happening. Of course, you're going to have everything is going to be centered there. The center of attention is where the vultures are flying.
Yeah. Phyllis, yeah. So yeah, I don't know if that's what he was talking about or not. That's what some of the commentators kind of connected, that the Roman. But anyway, there's definitely the warning is there, right? Do you want to be in the place where all the carcasses are, and in this case, the eagles are eating them? No, right? So the point is, this is a warning and advice to his disciples. But when you see these things happening, the best thing to do is hit the road. And that's the warning he's giving them here. All right, does anybody have any more comments on that section, Norman?
This has been a long process. It's hard for these guys, you can imagine, because you had 400 years of silence, you know, and all this period of time where the temple has been around, hundreds and hundreds of years, and it's kind of hard to think about the end of your race in essence. But that's what Jesus is, you know, asking these guys to do at this point. It's no wonder he had to send the Holy Spirit later on to give them an understanding.
Well, I mean, the closest thing we could relate that to would be if somebody walked you through Washington, D.C. and said, see the White House, see the Pentagon, see all these things, it's all going to be wiped out. It's going to be gone. What would that say to us? Our nation has been taken over, right? Or we've suffered a great defeat as a nation, and they had to interpret this in a similar way. All right, so continuing in verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn. And they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven in power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a great sound of trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Okay, so we see more signs here. What are these signs representing? Norma? Yeah,
Good old-fashioned judgment sign.
So what's the clue here again as to the timing of this? In verse 29. Immediately. Right. So again, we haven't changed time references here. So yeah, we've seen this. If we go back and study what Ezekiel, there's other pictures of judgment given where we see descriptions like this, and you know, and essentially what Jesus is saying, you know, that this, because we've seen this coming for years and years and hundreds of years for the Jews, right? And finally, judgment is ultimately coming upon them, right? That's what's happened. That's what he's describing here. And well, what about verse 31 though? What is that? What is it? He goes through this. What's the assurance? He will gather his own. His are still. He's going to protect his own, right? And if we take application of this, to me, I would say this is talking about the church, the early church, those folks. Because the kingdom will have been established, and his kingdom, it will be in effect when these events happen, right? The church will be set up and will have been in place for 35 years, something like that. AD 70 is when the temple was destroyed. So he's assuring them again that, hey, my people will be taken care of. Norma?
Too, because the Romans just considered the Christians to be just another sect of the Jews at this point in time. And so if they would have been slaughtered right along with the rest of them, just like, you know, all the Zealots, the Essenes, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and those Christian folks, you know, they're just another sect of the Jews anyway. If they had stayed, it would have been gone. So, I mean, so think about how God is providentially taking care of his people.
Now, I have to admit, I'm not a destruction of Jerusalem historical expert. I was hoping maybe something Norm might know a little more. When this happened, did they go after the whole nation, or was it focused in Jerusalem at the temple? So that was where the destruction was.
They hit the whole nation because Jerusalem was the last place they ended up.
Yeah,
everyone fled to Jerusalem, and that's when they happened.
And then Messiah. But that was the key, though, is they because of the Christians, they were just considered by the Romans as just another sect of Jews. If they hadn't gotten out of there, they would have been destroyed with the rest. So again, God's providence and this.
And that's a good point. If we tie that to some of the stuff we see in Acts, that scattering that happened in Acts was a good thing when it comes to this, wasn't it? And getting people out of Jerusalem and into the world around them. So, good point. Thank you for that.
Walton's had a point in their book about where the Christians went to and what city they congregated in outside of Jerusalem and everything. So it was something that they got out of there.
Yeah. Well, they heeded what they were told, which was obviously a good thing. All right, so continuing in verses 32 to 35. Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. You also, when you see all these things, know that it is near at the doors. Surely I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away. So what's the final clue here? All the stuff he's just talked about, when's it going to happen?
Folks are alive still.
During this generation, right? Surely I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. What we've been discussing so far is something that's going to happen within these people's lifetimes. What's the lesson from the fig tree? We've had some fig tree lessons before.
Will not pass away.
Yeah, his word will not pass away. And the fig tree thing is, if you see fruit on the tree, if you see fruit on an apple tree, does that tell you anything about what time of year it is? Yeah, there's a season that the tree will have apples, right? And you can discern the season by the fruit. And that's what it's back to the warning again. When you see these things happen, just like the apples are on the tree, it's time to leave. And again, a warning to them about what's going to happen. But again, to Shirley's point, he makes that assurance again, doesn't he? No, all this is going to happen, but my words are not going to pass away. The gospel is not going to pass away. The church is going to be maintained. Nor did you have a comment?
Challenge too to these people, these new folks who are going to be carrying on in the kingdom to pay attention. Don't go through life just letting things happen as they happen. Be a thoughtful people that pay attention, study the word, watch what's going on around you. Just wake up and because life's short.
David, do you have a comment?
No.
Okay, good. All right, so continuing now in verse 36. But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Then two men will be left in a field, one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and the other left. Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming. But know this, that if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Therefore you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his master made ruler over his household, to give him food in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his master, when he comes, will find so doing. Assuredly I say to you that he will make him ruler over all his goods. But if that evil servant says in his heart, my master is delaying his coming, and begins to beat his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, at an hour that he is not aware of, and will cut him in two, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So now we see a change. What he says, verse 36, but of that day and hour no one knows. Right, so we see a difference here now, don't we? What's he been saying before? Look for the signs, right? When you see all these things happen, hit the road. It's about to occur. Now he says nobody knows about when the Son of Man is coming. So I ask you in the question here, what do these passages teach about judgment, of the final judgment, of Jesus coming back? There's several things here. We've hit the first one. We don't know when it's going to be, Francis. That's a good point. It's going to happen. This day is going to come at some point. What else?
Not even Jesus knows at this point. This is something the Father is reserved for the Father.
It's reserved for the Father. What about life? What will life be like when he comes? Norm?
Be nothing discernible. There will be no sign that it is coming.
Yeah, he compares it back to Noah. But what was happening when the flood came?
Normal stuff.
They were eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage. Life was just going along, right? Life was going along, and it happened. And that's the description that we see here. And so what's the lesson? Be prepared, right? Be prepared no matter what. If you're prepared at all times, then does the time matter? No, because you're prepared. In Mark's version, Mark 13 verse 37. I want to read that one. 13:37. It says, "And what I say to you, I say to all, watch." One version said, "Watch for him." And again, that's back to be prepared, isn't it? Be ready. And watch is kind of an expectation thing, isn't it? I always, how when you're a grandparent and the grandkids, you drive up there standing at the window looking for the grandparents to show up. They're watching, right? Because they're expecting us to show up and bring them something usually. But anyway, they're expecting us, right? So that it's kind of that. It's not a. I don't think this is a scared watch, is it? This is a prepared, confident watch. If we're prepared, is there any reason to fear Christ's return? Absolutely not, right? It's something for us to look forward to. But now we get into this story of the servants. What does that one show us? Yeah, it's back to more preparedness. It's kind of that whole thing. It's kind of easy. Well, man, it's been how long? 2,000 years. He ain't come back yet. Is he going? How can is he still going to come? Or he ain't going to come anytime soon. So I can, in the case of this one servant, I can misbehave. I can mismanage and beat his fellow servants, eat and drink with the drunkards. But again, the point is, you don't know. Right? And there's going to be an accountability for our behavior, right? That's really what this is getting at as well, that this master is going to come back. We don't know when, but when he comes back, his servants will be accountable to what he expected of them, right? Is what this is teaching. Norman?
About the controllable versus the uncontrollable. I mean, what happens in the world is uncontrollable from us, from our standpoint. We can't change what other people think, what they do, all that kind of stuff. But the only thing this watchfulness is, what's my relationship with God right now? Because right now is the only time that I have. And I don't know if I'm going to die or Christ is going to come first. Either one of those is going to, but all I've got is right now. And unless I'm watching my soul's condition right now, then I am without hope.
Yeah, and I grew up in a denominational church, and I have to say this stuff was kind of fun. Man, we had all these prophecies going. Back then, it was the Russians were the bears, and we were something else. And you had all these the end time signs and all this that people were pointing to. And I guess that's all well and good, but in a way, it's not good, because it kind of leaves you with that. Well, if there's signs and we ain't quite seeing them yet, then I got time, right? Is the way we can take that. But versus how, what again, this is teaching us what? know signs and always be prepared, right? Yeah, and it's it's amazing if you go back and look through even the last few hundred years of history. There's always been said that we're in the last days. We're in the last few days. Jesus is just about to come back, and again, I guess there's nothing all the way wrong with that in thinking we should think that way. But again, the people are trying to discern signs that aren't going to be there. I mean, this plainly teaches what? Nobody knows. It's going to be just normal life, and it's going to happen. Norman, or Pete, excuse me.
Even better is there's not going to be any miraculous revelation to it either, because not even the people that would deliver the message know.
Yeah.
The only one that knows is the only one that decides when it ends, and there's not going to be any angel that's going to find out. So there's not going to be any message delivered. Hey, it's about to happen. There will be no signs, just like in the days of Noah. There will be no signs. He will tell Noah, get in the ark, and that's the end right there. And when the ends come, he's like, all right, son, grab him up, gone.
Yeah, and the door was sealed, it was sealed, wasn't it? Yeah. All right, so we won't read through the next couple of passages we're really familiar with. So in 1 through 13 is the parable of the wise and foolish virgins. What's the lesson there? Same thing, right? Be prepared. Penny?
To apply this to our children, whenever I would have to take my mom, because she lived with us for a while at the end, I would have to take her to the doctor a lot. And my kids were old enough to stay home alone, but I would give them a list of chores to do, and they had to have them done by the time I got back. So if they messed around and waited till the car pulled in the driveway, that was a little bit too late. So the one who got her chores done got a reward, and the one who didn't got punished. And so, it was just to tell them that's how God's going to be. You're not going to know when He's coming back, so you have to do what you're told to do and get it done so you're ready for the return.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that, unfortunately, that's human nature, isn't it? To put it up, I don't need to do that today. I can do it. I can do it tomorrow. Yeah, the procrastination thing, and when it comes to our soul, that's not the way to behave, is it? And that's the lesson of the virgins here. And then the next section is the parable of the talents. Same kind of thing. Question 9 there? What is Jesus' expectation of His followers while He's away? Is what I ask. Work. That's what Phil is saying, the same thing. Work. Yeah, we have been given this great thing, right? Go ahead and do Gil. Yes, be good stewards. I mean, we've been blessed with the gospel. We've been blessed with abilities to help spread the gospel, to build the kingdom, to encourage and strengthen one another, and we're expected to use them. Yeah, so it's actually, when we read this passage, there's a big warning here. You look at verses 29 and 30. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away, and cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And that's a pretty stern statement there. It's like Penny was saying, get your chores done. If you don't have them done when I get home, look out. And if the one that did gets the reward, the one that didn't, look out. And that's what he's saying here. Norman?
There's a lot of talk about equity today. This is the opposite of equity, where everybody gets the same reward no matter what happens. This is not that. Mm-hmm. It's clearly saying that the way of the world is when you grow and you get stronger and bigger, you can do more and more, and everything that if you don't do that, just the opposite. Whatever you lose, it's gonna wither away.
And the interesting thing to me here is, like you said, it's a good comparison. In the world, we recognize this and actually want it, don't we? We want more responsibility. We want more in our jobs. We get paid more. We can do more of the things we want to do. And for some reason, spiritually, people tend to behave a little different. It's like, well, why do you not want to grow spiritually? Isn't that a good thing to grow, to do more for God, do more in the church? You're just building up treasure for yourself, if you want to look at it that way, right? There's nothing wrong with that. You're building treasure in heaven when you grow in the church. It's something we should desire, not something it's something that we should want to do is to grow. All right, well, let's finish up. We'll read the last section here about the judgment, beginning in verse 31. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. And the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from another, as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. And he will set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you? And the king will answer and say to them, Surely I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me. Then he will also say to those on the left hand, Depart from me, you cursed, into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not take me in. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. Then they also will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not minister to you? Then he will answer them, saying, Assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. So I ask a question here, what things will happen at the final judgment? Back to the Francis' point a minute ago, there's going to be one, right? And there's going to be a separation, isn't there? This teaching that God could never send anybody to hell, it'll all be fine in the end. That's not what this passage teaches, is it? There's two distinct groups. And isn't it kind of interesting here, in one of the main points that the little things matter in God's kingdom? A drink of water, visiting somebody. Again, there's expectations of how we should be behaving in his kingdom. And how long does the things that happen after the separation last? Forever, right? But these will go away into how long of a punishment? Everlasting, and the righteous to eternal life. Well, thank you and you think about this. Boy, didn't Jesus just lay a lot on them here in this? You think about the timing here. This was probably just during the course of a day. Look at what they just went through, as far as from the destruction of Jerusalem all the way to the end of time and the expectations of them. A lot going on here for the disciples, for sure. Okay, well, thanks for your time. I'll get the next set. I'll run down and copy them now, so lesson 10 will be out there in a few minutes for you to pick up.